I don't read the New York Times a lot. It's pretty much Barack Obama's talking points. It's the definition of legacy media. You know, a big name, a big history, but liberal to its bones and very self-important. But whatever my criticisms of it are, it remains authoritative, at least to other journalists and to the left. I say this because yesterday, the New York Times had a lengthy, detailed analysis of the state of the middle class in various G20 countries. And they concluded that Canada's middle class is now the richest in the world, overtaking Americans. It was such an important story to them that they put it on the front page. A1, you can see it right there under the picture of the Ukrainian funeral. It's rare that the New York Times would publish something that's so embarrassing to Barack Obama. They've been his loudest cheerleaders, but the data are pretty incredible. You can see it online too if you like. They publish a series of graphs comparing the incomes of the middle class in various countries to the United States. You see that the top gray line is the United States, still amongst the highest in the world, but look at what happened under Obama. The middle class, it started to tick down. It's getting poorer. Now, a number of the world's countries have had a tough time since the Great Recession of 2008. I mean, Spain and Ireland, for two examples, their middle class has been hit even worse than the United States, and they started much poorer than the U.S. to begin with. But look on the far left of the graph there, Canada. Not only did our middle class keep getting stronger over the past 5 years, but we were starting pretty strongly to begin with. Now we are richer than Americans. This is great news for us. Enough that the New York Times, the Bible of the left, put it on their front page. Now, of course, the New York Times didn't do this to promote Canada, and certainly not to promote the party that has governed Canada for the past 8 years, or our Prime Minister, who is an economist, who has helped lead us through the recession better than any other G8 country. That's just a local side effect of their story from New York, but that is the fact. And the reason it's important to us, not just that it confirms that we're doing something right, and that Canada is the greatest country in the world, and that we're making better decisions than the United States. The reason I'm talking about it today is because the New York Times just destroyed the central economic campaign platform of Justin Trudeau and his Liberals. As you know, Justin Trudeau was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and a silver Mercedes Roadster in the garage. He inherited a multi-million-dollar trust fund from his father, Pierre Trudeau, who inherited a trust fund from his father, too. This is a family that is so rich and privileged that it hasn't had to work for 3 generations. And indeed, in Justin Trudeau's case, for much of his life, he, in fact, chose not to work. Just a quick clip because it's so amazing. Here's Justin Trudeau telling an Iranian-Canadian newspaper that he was so rich as a young man and so carefree that he literally traveled to 90 different countries as a rich kid tourist. Look.
You never been to Iran?
Not yet. No, not yet. I've been to about 90 different countries.
Can you believe that? He knows he's a rich man of leisure. He admits his money and his name or why he is where he is. He confessed it at a boxing ring earlier this year, too.
I will tell you, there is no experience like stepping into this ring and measuring yourself, all that, your name, your fortune, your intelligence, your beauty, none of that matters.
So he knows he comes across as a pretty boy prince who thinks he deserves to be our ruler because of his name and his money, because he's really, really ridiculously good looking. But to neutralize that, he thought he'd cast himself as a champion of the middle class. I mean, he's pretty friendly with all of his servants, right? Why, he talks to middle class people every day. His housekeeper, his gardener, his cook. Here's an outtake from one of his TV ads showing him relating to the middle class people in his life.
Please sit down.
Is there something we can do, sir?
I just wanted to come down to say hello.
No, I'm kidding. But Trudeau keeps talking about he's going to be an economic savior to the middle class. I think that's what he thinks the middle class looks like. He talks about how tough things are for the middle class. Remember this?
The middle class is already having a hard time making ends meet and struggling with debt. Tax increases for them are not in the cards and not on the table.
Well, other than talking about marijuana legalization, talking about the middle class is now his new favorite policy. He even did a whole TV cartoon about it, except it always seems a bit fuzzy. I mean, did he really even know what the middle class was? Does he really know the facts about it? It always sounded like he was memorizing a few sound bites and really didn't have a grasp of things. Remember when our own Marissa Semkiw tried to pin him down with a simple question? What's the definition of the middle class?
What income range for individuals and households constitutes middle class?
I've spoken with Canadians across the country who are facing record levels of household debt and a real strain. And one of the things that's very clear is that they don't need greater taxes. Tax hikes are not on the table at all. And that's what I've been focused on.
Mr. Trudeau, with all due respect, you're speaking in platitudes. I'd like a number. What income range?
There are all sorts of different ways of calculating which decile or quintile constitutes the middle class. The reality is that I consider that the middle class is people who work for their income, not people who live off their assets and their savings.
It really seems like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Sorry, middle class has got nothing to do with how you earn your living, if it's from capital or if it's from labor. I mean, if that were the test, then a pensioner living off their life savings would be rich, and a banker earning $1 million a year would be middle class. It just makes sense. We all sort of sense that Trudeau doesn't know what he means, but now the New York Times proves it. I mean, how could he get it so wrong when he says our middle class is in trouble? I think there are two main reasons. The first one is Trudeau himself doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not an economist. He doesn't think about things like this. All the financial or business thinking in his life has been done by the accountants his daddy put in place to manage his trust fund, the people who take care of things for him so he can jet to 90 different countries carefree. Unlike Stephen Harper, who has a master's degree in economics, it's just not Trudeau himself. Trudeau's new economics advisor, Chrystia Freeland, she's not an economist either. She knows a fair bit about Russian history. That's what she studied in university. She's writing a lot these days about Ukraine. About the economy, yeah, not so much. The second reason Trudeau got it so wrong is that his campaign has hired campaign advisors from Barack Obama's campaign. That's not a secret, that's not gossip. It's a fact. They have Obama staff speaking at their conferences. In fact, the key panel discussion at their last policy convention was between an Obama economics advisor, Lawrence Summers, and the aforementioned Chrystia Freeland. So you had an expert in everything Obama has been doing wrong, an expert who recommended more debt, more deficits, more taxes, more bureaucracy, but knows nothing about Canada, that's Lawrence Summers, talking with Chrystia Freeland, who just moved back to Canada from New York a few months ago. So when Chrystia Freeland and Lawrence Summers say that middle class is hurting, well, I guess they're not actually wrong. They're just talking about the country they know best, the United States. I mean, look at those graphs again. It's true. Under Obama, the middle class is hurting. They just don't know anything about our own middle class in Canada. And Trudeau certainly doesn't know enough to correct them. But now that the New York Times has corrected them, well, Trudeau's at a bit of a loss. Here's Trudeau's puppet master, the economically illiterate Gerald Butts, former senior advisor to Ontario's Premier Dalton McGuinty, who turned Ontario from a have province to a have-not province. What does Gerald Butts have to say about this great news in the New York Times? He said, if Canada didn't pass the U.S. in economic performance over the last decade, now that would be a story. Oh, my God. So it was all inevitable, eh? It was inevitable that Canada would actually exceed the United States. Really? Well, the last province that Gerald Butts touched as senior advisor used to be Canada's economic powerhouse, Ontario. Now it has Obama-sized debt and is a have-not province. That wasn't inevitable at all. It was the result of Gerald Butts' policies. But that whole cavalier attitude, well, of course Canada should be doing this well. It's just junk. It's just naivete. Is it really so obvious that Canada should do better than any other country in the world? It's not. It's arrogance, actually. Just like when Trudeau himself said this.
In this economic climate, how committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Would it worry you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
Oh, yeah, budgets. They just balance themselves. Just like his rich kid's trust fund budget always balances itself, right? Because Daddy hired the best accountants for him. They made it balance. One last note, not about the Liberals, but about the media party. Of course, if Canada had slipped down instead of moving to the top, this would be the front page story in every newspaper in Canada, the lead story on the nightly news. It would be all hung around Stephen Harper's neck. Of course it would be. You know that. Well, the opposite has happened. I read stories in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, CBC, CTV News, Global News, Huffington Post, and none of them praised Harper. And you know they would have attacked him if the news were the reverse. But I don't think Harper lives for their praise. But what's more interesting, in each of those news stories I just mentioned, not one of them criticized Trudeau or showed how this news from an impeccable liberal source like the New York Times, not one of these media reports mentioned how this absolutely demolishes, devastates Trudeau's central campaign platform. No, not his marijuana platform, that the middle class in Canada needs saving. Now today, our own Marissa Semke tried to ask Trudeau the question. I mean, he says it's his favorite subject other than marijuana. Here, look at that attempt to ask a simple question. Take a look.
Can I get you to comment on Canada's middle class being the richest in the world?
Right here. Thanks.
Do you stand by your comments that of Canada's middle class?
Yeah. No,
Justin, there's a new report that says Canada's middle class is the wealthiest in the world. Do you have a comment about it?
So we're talking about people here in a way that is giving them the capacity to contribute, to be part of strong, vibrant communities. And the kids who made the skateboard are going to have a better future because of great community initiatives like this.
Yeah,
and that's all
I totally
agree right now.
That's
Thanks.
fine, but I just want to know if you have a comment about the new report.
No, that's all I have to say right now.
Why are you refusing my question?
So tiresome, these little people. Come on. Yeah, no luck. Maybe if Marissa had asked Trudeau for a selfie fangirl picture, he would have made the time. I mean, he cut out of Jim Flaherty's funeral procession for that. Oh well, I guess his economic platform isn't as important. Trudeau's central campaign theme has just been taken away from him. The only questions left are, will he continue to pretend our middle class is getting poorer? And will the media party go along with his ruse?